Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about recharging your batteries. And so often, this topic comes up a lot around holidays, spring breaks, anytime we're just taking a vacation, which, Justin, you recently did. And I know for the both of us that when we're on vacation, we are often working. We're always squeezing in emails, sometimes phone calls, and we're so tethered to not just our phones, but we're tethered to what we do. It's kind of our DNA. It's kind of who we are as entrepreneurs and leaders. But you recently had a vacation where I wouldn't say you were forced, but based on the circumstances, you really couldn't work. And that was challenging for you, as it would be for me. But tell us that story and why, looking back at it now, it was such a great experience.
Yeah, so it's a great way to think about it. I think it's funny that we do an episode because I took some time off, but it is a great topic because we all deal with it. But so just the kind of premise of what we're talking about. So I was fortunate enough to take my wife and kids to Italy and Greece over a 2-week span. And really the reason for it was my daughter will be going off to college here soon. And, a year ago, kind of made this decision of I wanted to take them over to Europe, kind of experience a different part of the world before she went off. And, just to give you kind of perspective, taking 2 weeks off, I've literally never done in my life. And so, much less probably even a full week, I could probably count maybe once or twice in my life. And even when it was usually stateside. And so, I'd still work every morning for a couple hours and work in the day. And I don't say that, anyone that's listening to this has experienced a lot of these same things. But to your point, there were some things that I think call it experiment, experience, whatever you want to call it, I think was really helpful for me. And the fact that it forced me to think differently about it because it was something I hadn't done before. But so I think there's a few things I kind of pull from it. One, yes, I didn't work in the formal sense over that 2-week period because of the time difference and things like that. There's a few check-ins that had to happen and all that sort of stuff. But I think there were two things that were really important. One, I think a lot of times when people talk about kind of recharging and taking time, it means just not working. And that can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. But I think the reason this one became easier for me was because it was so clearly tied into my why. So if said differently, if I would have taken 2 weeks off and was just kind of sitting on a beach, kind of staring into the abyss for 2 weeks, that might be great for some people. And that might be the recharge that they need. That would have drove me nuts. I would have actually, those 2 weeks actually wouldn't have been enjoyable to me. I would have felt like I was kind of just wasting away time because it would be so disconnected to my why of who I want to be and what do I want to accomplish and what I want to stand for. But because candidly, this was my, kind of hurrah trip with my, kind of for my daughter as she goes off, but, with, both of my kids and wife, it became easier to unplug and focus right in where we were because it was so aligned to my why of being a great husband, being a great father, being a leader. So that I think was the most critical part to start with. So as anyone's thinking about what does recharging mean, you can recharge in a lot of different ways. I mean, in these 2 weeks, we didn't break at all. I mean, we were running, we were exhausted, candidly, at the end of the 2 weeks, but I still came back refreshed, despite that we were, kind of physically exhausted because I was fulfilling my why while I was there, and I could come back and fulfill my why in a different way, coming right back out of the gate. And so I think that was one of the kind of big learnings, I think, that kind of was reinforced for me. I think the second thing is the value of clarity and preparation. So we decided to do this a year in advance. And so for the last year, I've been thinking through these 2 weeks and how could I set myself up for success for these 2 weeks, which might seem crazy and obsessive. But what it did is it forced me to think through the lens of what are the things that I really need to be doing. And we talk a lot about how are you 80-20 in your day? How are you getting really laser focused on what are the most impactful things you need to do in a day, in a week, in a month, in a quarter, in a year? And this put, a whole nother layer on top of that, because I I knew there were certain things that if I was truly out of pocket for 2 weeks, had had to have a place in the case something happened or something I couldn't address, or just even couldn't address as timely as I normally would have. And that was a phenomenal preparation. And so I think, as we talk about recharging, I think there's kind of a few things about it. I think one, it has to be rooted in your why. And then I think the second thing is understanding how to prepare even for the recharge in a way that allows you to do it guilt-free. So many people that try to quote unquote recharge, I think a lot of times we think that the reason they didn't recharge is because they never unplugged. I mean, I'm in my early 40s. This is the first time I've ever done this. So clearly you don't need this to prevent burnout, right? Like you can actually not take a whole lot of vacation time, constantly being green, constantly, but as long as it's tied to your why, it's okay. I think a lot of times the reason people struggle with it is because they're tethered to it. They're not unplugging, and it's not fulfilling their why. It's noise, and they know it. They know it's noise. They know it's not driving to their goals. They know it's things they probably shouldn't have to deal with, or there's a better way to deal with it, right? And they just, for some reason, can't create that connection. It could be fear. And then again, and sometimes it could be real, right? I mean, 10 years ago, where I was with my career, where we were as a business, I absolutely could not have done this. I just couldn't have. Now, that doesn't mean I couldn't do a variation of it, but there's no way that I could have pulled this off. Where we were, how I prepared, where we were as an organization, where I was as a leader, all of that kind of led to this point.
Yeah, I love that story. It's very relatable, I think, for a lot of people. My lens on all of this is that there are a lot of people out there that are working themselves into burnout, and they don't know it until they're there or on the verge of burnout. And whether it's burnout or it's on the verge of, mental health issues, we get there because we've put ourselves in a position of self-inflicted wounds, right? Where it's like, oh, I don't need a vacation, or I don't need to work out, or I don't need to take care of myself. I'll be fine, right? We'll just work through it, right? And because I've been close to that position a few times in life, you look back, you're like, I'm not happy with where I'm at in my life, or I'm not happy with uh, my accomplishments, or I just don't feel like this is enough. You don't ever want to be put in that position. And because I've been pretty close to that spot a few times in life, I've looked back and said, what could I do differently? And so I've started to adapt the philosophy of, if I can't fill my cup, I can't fill the cup of others. And you may be listening to this saying, Chris, well, I'm not a leader. I don't lead a big team, or, this doesn't matter as much for me. I'd say it does, because take any friendship or relationship you have, you still have to fill that cup, because a relationship is a two-way street. Could be family, could be your parents, could be your spouses, could be your kids. You need to fill those cups. You lead in their life in different capacities. And whether people report to you or not, you're still a leader at work. And so if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. And that is a cold, hard reality. And sometimes it was very refreshing when I first heard that. And it took a major health issue for me to get to say, I need to reverse engineer what's happening in my life. And so it started by taking care of myself physically. And I realized that there were a few things that I enjoyed to do that I need to do more of, which is, one of them was playing golf. Some people just have an oasis, whether it be pickleball or tennis or golf. Running was another one for me. So exercising made me feel better. It helped me sleep better at night. I also prioritized my diet. I started cutting out certain things and forcing myself to eat healthier. And if you fast forward a couple years later, and I don't take any medications. I don't have any health issues. I feel like a different person because I've prioritized sleep and food and relationships. I've taken care of myself. I could be going to the chiropractor, could be getting a massage. But if you fill the cup, if you take care of your domain, you then have the mental capacity to take care of others. And so I look at it like, I get excited to go on vacation, whereas in the past, it kind of felt like a chore. leading up to it, be like, I don't have time for this. I don't know how I'm going to fit this in. This is really stressful. I've got to pack. I've got to do all these things. And then, like you said, it's a big stress because in the past I didn't prepare and I'd come back to chaos, to mess. And you said you spent basically a year preparing for a 2 week vacation. It should take time. You should prepare. Are you going to come back to a lot of work? Yes, you are. But if you take the time to plan and prepare, whether it's a few weeks or a few months, I think you're going to come back rejuvenated. You're going to come back to a little extra work, but you because you feel like I had a purpose, I had a why. My why is this helps. It's what I want to have, make memories with my family. I want to be a present dad, I want to be a good spouse. So it aligns to my why, not much differently than it does for you. But I know it needs to happen because I do like sitting at a beach for a week. I couldn't sit there for 2 weeks, but you got to kind of zoom out in my eyes a little bit and say, what am I doing to take care of myself and my mental health? Because I don't want to have those problems down the road. I don't want to be on the verge of burnout. And I also say this is like, how many vacations do you regret? How many times you look back and say, I regret taking that vacation? Maybe you regret choosing where you went or you regret it because of the weather, but you seldom regret taking that time off and making those memories with friends or family and loved ones. And
Mhm.
that's what I think is so important here.
Absolutely. I mean, and you can see it, obviously this last one was an extreme example, but I think if you understand what's important to you, it can cut both ways, right? So I think a lot of times when people hear things like this, they think, okay, so you're just telling me I need to work less. And that's
Yeah,
not it at all, right? Like I think it's more just getting very focused on where are you spending your time and how does it align to the things that you actually want it to. Because so I'll use myself on a more traditional vacation. My wife and family know that how I operate is every morning I'm going to wake up and I'm going to get a couple hours of work done before anyone's awake. And sometimes it's just work that needs to happen, right? To your point, it's an email response, it's a decision that needs to be made, things like that. But plenty of times it's not. Plenty of times it's actually like I'm doing deep thinking about something in the business or something in my career or something. And we call it quote unquote work, but it's really it's just thinking time and it's strategy and all that sort of stuff. Well, and the reason I do that is because what I've realized is I look at my why, right? Like I know that if I do that for a couple hours, first of all, I do it in a way that it never takes away any of our family time. They're sleeping. They're not, they're not worried about me. And then when they're up and they're ready to roll, so am I. And I can do the rest of the day guilt free, right? I can do the rest of the day without, and not even guilt free. That might be the wrong way to say, distraction free, because I know I've done this part, right? And it can be that, it can be, sometimes it's exercise too, right? Like I'm going to get up, get my workout in before everyone else, right? Because then I just know the rest of the day I'm good. And if you have that clarity of what's important and why, then whether it's a 2 week, whether it's a long weekend, or whether it's just, how are you kind of balancing the two while you're away, it all finds a way. And everyone's different, right? Like nobody's why is the same. So everybody's strategy on how to address it. But I think a lot of times that's where people get lost, is they feel, almost addicted to the rat race over here. And so
sure.
then they not only don't recharge, they're, this other domain they're failing in. And usually the actual secret, because we've seen this time and time again when we talk to people, is there's usually something else that's taking up your time that you don't realize that is in neither one of those buckets. And that's actually the thing that's taking you away from your goals. I think far too often, I've shared this before, I'll share it again. I hate the word work-life balance because no one has ever said like, I need more work-life balance because I need to work more. Right. And
Right.
so why do I feel it's a misnomer? I think it's an absolute misnomer because I get where people are coming from. They feel like they're out of whack and they're leaning towards burnout. But I don't think it's a work-life balance. I think it's an imbalance of where you're spending your time as opposed to what you believe your why really is.
The time balance.
Mm-hmm. For
Yeah.
sure.
It's interesting. You talk about time. I heard someone recently say, maybe it wasn't that recent, what you should do if you're in your 40s, even your 30s, is you should spend a day or an evening at a nursing home. Said you should go and you should talk to some people. You should volunteer, take your kids because it'd be even better lesson for them. And just by talking, having conversations, you're going to hear most people say, and they're going to give you advice because that's what older people like to do. They're going to say, I wish, I woulda, coulda, shoulda, or don't forget to do this. And they're full of regrets. A lot of people are when they get to an older age. And that's why I think it's so important to get clarity in your life, to understand what you enjoy and take time to do those things and find the balance so that you can enjoy yourself. Because if you can fill your cup personally, you can bring your best self to work. You can be your best leader. You can get the best results out of yourself. But it starts by taking care of yourself. And when you do work smarter, you work more effectively, you can say, you know what, I am going to take time this evening to go to that concert, or I am going to plan that golf outing, or I'm going to make it a priority. I'm going to make this 2-week vacation happen. And that is how you recharge your batteries. You have to, it all starts up here. It all starts with a want to. And getting back to what this is all about, Dustin, is having that vision, creating a vision for life and business. What is it that you really want? Because if you don't know what you want, you're certainly not going to know where to spend your time or how to spend it. And if you don't know that, you're probably also, you don't have the priorities to take care of yourself. And if you can't take care of yourself, I'd argue you're probably feeling a bit aimless at times and could be on the verge of burnout. And I think all of this is very much avoidable if you have a master plan, if you have that vision.
For sure. I mean, you're exactly right. The times when I know I need to make sure I go back and really rework my vision and how it ties to everything is when I feel that. If you're ever in that point where you're feeling, man, I just don't, I'm feeling a little burnt out. Like I've actually, like everyone thinks that means they need to go recharge. I would challenge you to say that that's actually not necessarily where you need to recharge. What you actually should do first is go back and find some process and structure to go back and really figure out what is your vision for your life? What are the, in all domains of your life, getting really clear on that, because I find that 9 times out of 10, I'm really just starting to feel that because I'm not clear on my vision. And so that I'm not advancing, because when I'm advancing, I'm recharged because then I'm energized in any one of those domains. But if I start to lose that, and, as we talk about, I mean, I'm constantly going back to it. I look at it every day. I'm daily goal setting, weekly goal setting, quarterly goal setting, like constantly. But that doesn't mean like we're still human, right? We still, over the course of weeks and months, right? Like you get into a process, you get into a rut where all of a sudden, man, have I really thought deep about this lately? And so I would challenge anyone that's listening, if you're having that feeling, rather than thinking like, oh, I need to go recharge or I need to get away or whatever. Again, maybe that is the answer. I challenge you to start with, okay, what really is my vision and how am I tying into that today?
Yeah, and that may be one of the biggest myths with burnout is it all goes back to recharging the batteries. And there's no doubt there's a component of that, but the foundation of success in business and in life in any capacity is the strategy. In this case, it's having the vision, which is the catalyst of the strategy, because you have a strategy without a vision, it's all falsified, right? It's all just kind of made up arbitrary numbers and things that you think you might want. And that becomes the foundation for everything. And so just like strategies evolve in a business or a marketing plan evolves, so should your vision. And as you get older, you're going to want different things. You're going to prioritize different things. I was just having a conversation yesterday at a golf outing with a gentleman who owns a business who's still very involved, but he said, hey, look, at the age of 41, I don't want to be working nights and weekends anymore. I've got 3 kids and it's different. And what he wants and what his future is going to look like is going to be different moving into his 40s than what he thought he wanted just 5 years ago in his mid 30s. And so it's okay. In fact, I'd argue it's ideal if that vision changes, because it should. Your wants, your needs, your health, everything's going to change, and you should be looking at that regularly. Then it's not surprising to me to hear you tell me that you look at it all the time, not only because you use the hustle planner, of course, but because life changes. Just a couple years ago, you weren't thinking about your daughter going off to college. That changes a lot of things now, right? That may
Right.
change retirement. That may change a lot of things for you. And sometimes we don't know those things are going to change until that time comes. And you hate to be in a position where you look back and say, I wish I would have tackled my 40s differently, or I wish I would have done more in my 30s. And get a hold of that vision now, because it becomes almost like an extra lane on the highway for you to drive in. It gives you so much more capacity and so much more latitude to do more and accomplish more in your life. Any other thoughts on the vision and the recharging of the batteries, Dustin?
No, I think the again, the learnings for me was that if you align it to what you're really focused on in life, you prepare the heck out of it. It it actually does recharge you and gets you to come back and tackle the next thing with more intention.
All right, folks, you heard it. If you're interested in the vision, you want to go back, check out some of our previous episodes. The Hustle Planner is something that enlightens you. You can find that on our website. It's also available on Amazon. It's a great way to get intentional with your days and your times, get organized, and start moving to a better life. Thanks so much for tuning into another episode. We'll catch you on the next one.